Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Bayou Bets for Thursday, June the 22nd. I'm Zach Ewing, live from Charles Schwab Field in Omaha yet again, as we were on Monday. With me today is Gabe Henderson, back, actually not back at Advocate headquarters. Gabe's in Houston, so we're all over the place. But we're talking to most of you in Louisiana, so welcome into the show. Glad you could be here. And Gabe, exciting day for LSU baseball, obviously, facing Wake Forest for the third time this week. The teams have split the first two games. Whoever wins tonight is going to the College World Series finals.
Yeah, it's exciting. We either get a matchup of the top two teams in the nation with Wake Forest and Florida, or we get a rematch of the 2017 championship with LSU and Florida. So headlines, no matter which way you spin it. Hopefully got two exciting pitching matchups, although not confirmed yet, but it's going to be fun.
Yeah, and I know that's the question on a lot of people's minds is Paul Skenes going to pitch tonight? Is he going to start tonight? We think the answer is yes. We have not received any confirmation from LSU yet. You can see kind of behind me is LSU's dugout, and behind that is the bullpen. We're not allowed to go all the way down to the bullpen. Paul Skenes was down there momentarily, but he was just warming up with all the other pitchers. He's not down there right now. We're still 2 hours from game time. None of that really means anything. I mean, as I said before the show, Gabe, like you could say, oh, he's in the bullpen, he's going to start, or oh, he's back in the clubhouse staying cool because he's going to start. Like none of that tells us anything yet. We should know probably within 45 minutes or an hour when LSU releases its lineup. Is Paul Skenes starting? But honestly, just logically, like if you're LSU, you've got to start it with your season on the line tonight.
Absolutely. I mean, as I told you earlier, it's all hands on deck for LSU. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw any of the arms, but especially Paul Skenes. Everyone's got a potential championship series on their mind, but you can't think that way, especially if you're a manager. You've got to go with your best guy in your biggest game of the season.
Yeah, and it is it is a big day, and Wake Forest is very good. LSU's favored in this game. And before we dig into all of that, let us just say we're brought to you by Caesars Sportsbook. Go to NOLA.com/Caesars. Get your sign up. You can bet on this game. You can bet on the NBA draft tonight. We'll talk a little bit about that. You can bet on the NFL and college football for week one. Those odds are up already as well. So we encourage you to do that if you're not already signed up. NOLA.com/Caesars. We have a bonus bet if you lose. We have Caesars rewards points. You get all that sort of stuff. Sign up through our link, NOLA.com/Caesars. We'll tell you today. And while you're at it, subscribe to the Bayou Bets YouTube channel, right, Gabe? I mean, you got to. If you're not already subscribed, live updates from Omaha, all that sort of stuff, shorts from our shows in case you miss them, and notifications when we go live. So tell you what, let's do a quick weather report. It's warm. I doubt it's as warm as it is in Baton Rouge, but it's, I think, 89 degrees, and you can see only a couple of like those Toy Story clouds in the sky, if you know what I mean. Like it's very sunny out here. I got the shades on. The wind is blowing in, but it's not as windy as it has been the last couple nights. What wind there is does seem to be blowing in, but I don't know if you can see the flagpole. It's pretty static at the moment. And so I don't know that we're going to see as much of an effect from the wind tonight. Now, just as I say that, the wind's picked up just a little bit, and it's blowing in from right field. But look, what's going to suppress the scores tonight is the starting pitchers, not the wind.
Yeah, I think, if anything, LSU fans want to hear that there's wind because that's what's powered their pitchers over the last 2 days. We've seen the bullpen all year give up the long ball, and it's just not happened over the last 2 days. The wind has been their friend. The weather's been their friend.
Gabe, are you there? Did I lose you?
I'm here.
Oh, he's okay. Good. I just froze up for just a second here. So they're about to open the gates up there, and I hope my signal stays sharp when everybody comes in here. But yeah, Charles Schwab Field getting ready for what's considered game 14 of the World Series between LSU and Wake Forest. The winner goes to the championship series against Florida this weekend. You can see LSU's favored. We'll dig more into that, and then we'll circle back at the end of the show and give our predictions as well. But let's start where we usually do. Let's go to our headlines. And our headlines, obviously, LSU is number one, playing for a spot in the CWS finals tonight in Omaha. NBA draft tonight, big day in the NBA. We've already had one big trade. The Wizards, who just acquired Chris Paul from the Suns last week, they flipped him to the Golden State Warriors with Jordan Poole going back to Washington. LSU had another announcement today, the IARP, which is the NCAA's new investigative arm. revealed its findings. And really, I think good news for LSU, kind of just a slap on the wrist. They do get 3 years probation in football and men's basketball, but no serious punishments. The serious punishments reserved for Will Wade, who no longer coaches at LSU. Now he's at McNeese State. So, and then also the Saints announced today that their training camp will begin July 24th. So what is a slow time of year, Gabe, is not so slow. We'll be in Omaha at least tonight, possibly through Monday, which is June 26th, and then we got less than a month, and we got the Saints. So who's slowing down?
Yeah, no one. And, I think as LSU fans, we sigh a collective relief on the ruling today, because there was a lot of concern about whether or not basketball would get a postseason ban. People were talking about Matt McMahon and his ability to recruit guys who potentially couldn't play in the NCAA tournament. But now we've got all that figured out, and I think LSU, both in football and basketball, can move forward, although basketball was really the one that everyone was kind of holding their breath about. So.
Yeah, let's start there, actually. Hey, Jerry. Jerry's here. Glad to see you, as always. And let's start there while we're on the topic, Gabe, because we're going to spend a lot of time on baseball and some on the NBA draft, too. But as a recent LSU alumnus and someone who worked in student media while Will Wade was there, were you surprised they didn't get a postseason ban? I mean, it seemed like at one point it was almost like a foregone conclusion, like, well, hey, we're going to get a year, and what can you do? But they didn't even get that.
Yeah, it was intriguing. Let's say the longer this whole process was drawn out, I was less and less surprised by it. But at first, it really did seem like they would get 1, maybe 2 years of a ban. And I think Scott Woodward acting quickly and getting rid of Will Wade when he did really kind of helped in that case, at least in the NCAA side, because at the end of the day, you can't really suspend LSU from the postseason, considering they've self-imposed bans on themselves. And the fact that none of the people in the administration, with the coaching staff, none of the players are really the same anymore. And that goes for football as well, for the most part. I mean, while it might be viewed as Scott Woodward making his own hires, at the end of the day, he really cleaned house and got rid of everyone that was making those decisions that went toward the violations.
Yeah, and I think LSU and Scott Woodward played this really well, because Scott Woodward came in right around the time that all this was going down, got rid of Will Wade. The football team had a postseason ban for the 2020 season that they self-imposed, which was really shrewd because they weren't very good that year anyway. That was Ed Ogeron's last full season. I guess he technically coached the 2021 season, but he was a lame duck coach for half of that time. So they were 3-5, I want to say, and finished 5-5 and self-imposed the ban. That was the COVID year. Like, nobody wanted to go to a bowl game with that team anyway. So and the NCAA mentioned that today, that like, hey, LSU self-imposed some punishments and we took that into consideration. Well, if you're LSU, you're like, yeah, we'll gladly take that instead of a postseason ban coming up. So I think LSU worked out really well for them. They played it right. And the IARP gave them kind of the punishment they wanted. Now, of course, the probation, you do have to be careful. You kind of got to make sure you're playing by the rules. But with NIL, what are the rules? I mean, like,
exactly.
I think you could make a lot of arguments that something is within the rules of NIL now anyway, certainly what Will Wade did at that time would have been a lot more acceptable now, even though technically head coaches aren't supposed to get these NIL deals. So I think if you're LSU, you're very happy with what happened today.
Absolutely, and especially considering the fact that there's no rules in place around NIL, as you mentioned. I mean, it's a whole gray area. It's uncharted territory. We've never seen it before. But it was interesting. I think I did see Brian Kelly today say that he does want some rules around NIL, which I think he's kind of covering his own program there, because with no rules in place, the probation is, undefined, as you kind of alluded to.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, you want to be careful because you're under probation and follow all the rules, but do you know what the rules are? Mm-hmm. I don't know. So, all right, we're live in Omaha, or I am, for the College World Series here at Charles Schwab Field. I'm trying to give you a wider view and see if this works here. Oh, I went upside down for a second. There we go. There's a wider view of LSU batting practice here from Omaha. They'll be playing Wake Forest at 6 p.m. And the odds right now show LSU as the favorite. Interesting thing, Gabe, these odds have been a little bit all over the place. They opened up last night. I want to say it was LSU minus 145 when they opened. Then they moved to all the way up to like minus 210 for LSU. The market certainly kind of anticipating that Paul Skenes would start. They went all the way back down, though, to like minus 150, minus 160. And now, just a couple of hours before game time, LSU's at minus 170. Those aren't huge differences. But usually when these games start moving, they only move in one direction. So it's interesting to see that two-way movement.
It really is. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like a lot of people are going to be betting on college baseball to shift the odds in the market. But I really do think once you get the number one team in the nation at minus 210 odds and stuff like that's when people are like, all right, the value is there. Even if you don't think they're going to win, it's worth a flyer around those odds.
Jay, you've got Wake Forest winning 8-5. By the way, the over-under in this game, I'm working with a gimbal here, and it's going a little crazy on me, so I apologize for all the – don't mean to make anybody sick. I'm just going to keep it like this for now. This maybe the more shocking number than LSU being favored. The over-under in this game is only 8.5, and I've seen as low as 8 and even 7.5 at different places in the market. Now, a lot of games in Omaha have been low-scoring. Last night was 5-2 through 3 innings, and it ended 5-2. So, maybe that's just what we're going to see tonight too. A lot of 3-2 games in Omaha. We've seen a 5-0 game. LSU beat Tennessee. So 5 runs probably wins this game. But you could also make the argument that, hey, Paul Skenes and the presumed Wake Forest starter Rhett Lowder are not used to working on this kind of rest, and maybe they won't be as effective as usual.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, especially because, as you mentioned, they're on shortest rest they've both been on all year. But at the same time, they're both projected top 10 picks, and this is the MLB regular rest. So we're teams in the MLB are really gonna see how they do tonight. But yeah, these are two of the best pitchers in the country. I see Tyler has Wake Forest 4, LSU 3.
Love the predictions. Keep them coming, guys. I know there's some people out there who think LSU is going to win.
Yeah, we've got a low-scoring prediction there, and I really do think that it is a justified line at 8.5 for the total, because I mean, as you can see by the odds below for the over/under on the pitchers' strikeouts, I mean, these guys are expected to deal. These are two of the best pitchers in the country, as evidenced by their draft positions. And I don't think, especially with the way these teams have been hitting the ball, with the weather as well. I mean, LSU's only got 2 home runs in the last 2 games. You're not going to see the ball leave the yard a lot. And with both teams having really good, solid defenses, it's going to be a low-scoring game. So I think you're right, Zach. I think 5 runs might be enough to win.
Yeah, I look at these strikeout numbers, and I mean, the best bet of the night might be Paul Skenes. And I think Skenes is going to be effective. I think LSU probably wins this game. We'll make predictions later. But 11.5 strikeouts, where is that number coming from? He struck out 11 on Saturday on full rest against a Tennessee team that their lineup probably is not as good as this Wake Forest team. We really think Paul Skenes is going to strike out 12 guys? You certainly cannot bet that over.
No, definitely. And that's why for today's best bets, I was tasked with doing that. And Paul Skenes under 11.5, immediate best bet. Because, I mean, like you mentioned, they're on short rest, and I don't know if he can give you I think 7 1/3 innings that he did the other day against Tennessee, 7 2/3. It's just, I just don't see it happening. Obviously, the adrenaline kicks in games like this, but it's tough. Rhett Lowder's is a lot more realistic, I will say that. But.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, really, the first question you have to answer if you're betting this is how deep are these guys going to go? Now, I will say this, and here's what's one of the great things about Omaha is that so many people who are locals get into this tournament every year. And there's been so much said about how this is Baton Rouge North and the people of Omaha love having LSU here. And I've heard that too. I've heard people at my hotel say, "Oh, to LSU fans, we hope you stick around a little longer. It's good for business, we love having LSU fans here in Omaha." But beyond that, people care about the games. My Uber driver driving me back from the stadium to the hotel last night was talking about it, and we're sitting here talking about the chess match that's going to go on. Where if you're Paul Skenes and LSU, you're probably not going to throw 123 pitches a game. He's on the shortest rest he's been on his whole college career. 123 now he threw 124 against Tulane a couple weeks ago. That was a season high. So we're talking right at his season high. he's not going to throw that many pitches tonight. So if you know that, you're going to be aggressive, right? Like if I'm only going to get 100 pitches, I need to get through 7 innings. I'm going to pump strikes. But if you're Wake Forest on the other side, you're going to try to wait him out and make him throw pitches. And so now this begins this chess match. Okay, I'm Wake Forest. I'm going to try to make him throw 25, 30 pitches in the first inning. But if he's pumping strikes, I've got to be ready to be aggressive and hit what he gives me too. So that's what I'm looking for early. And I think it's very, very important for either team to get off to a good start in this game. So that chess match becomes especially crucial.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the pitching plan, we've seen LSU over the last 2 days, their plan has been to attack the strike zone, but they don't have Paul Skenes on the mound. So sometimes they've had pitchers like Griffin Herring yesterday. There were a lot of pitches. But Paul Skenes is a guy, and this is the reason he's a projected top 3 pick. This is a guy that attacks the strike zone, and he's got command of every single pitch that he has. So I don't think it's crazy to see him going 7 innings, even with a pitch limit of, say, 100, as you said. Especially considering LSU. If you're either team, really, it's all hands on deck. We talked about it in production. We probably won't see Griffin Herring tonight, but I'd imagine every other pitcher in LSU bullpen is available, and that includes Riley Cooper, even though he's gone the last few days.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think a lot of people have said, well, don't you have to save Skenes for the weekend, or what are you going to do on the weekend? You got to get to the weekend before you can worry about the weekend. And that includes throwing Paul Skenes tonight. I was just taking a quick look. We're live here on Charles Schwab Field in Omaha while you were talking, looking for Paul Skenes, and I don't see him out there. The LSU bullpen is empty. I mean, look, we're still an hour and 45 minutes from game time. That doesn't tell you anything. The starting pitcher for either team, Wake Forest, doesn't even have anybody on the field right now. It's not their turn to take BP. They're in the dugout, a couple of them, but it does look like we can tell you LSU will be the home team tonight, so they do have that advantage. They're gonna bat last. They're in the third base dugout, and we've just really got to. Jordan Thompson's working on bunting. That'll make people happy, or not. But we're just gonna have to wait and find out. Probably 30 to 45 minutes, we will know if Paul Skenes is announced as the starter. We expect it to be that way. But let's say, Gabe, that it is 100 pitches, okay? And that gets Paul Skenes through somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 or 7 innings. But you've got 2 to 3 innings you've got to soak up with that bullpen. You mentioned Riley Cooper probably could go a 4th straight day. I don't think you're going to want him to pick up all 2 or 3 of those innings. The first guy in my mind to back up Paul Skenes will be Gavin Guidry.
I completely agree. Yeah, Gavin Guidry, he was the go-to guy down the stretch when LSU's bullpen was really struggling. He was the closer. He is young, but I really do think Jay Johnson and his staff trust him. I wouldn't be surprised to see him.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of different ways that you could go with it. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the very last thing you said because the Oregon started playing here. They are letting fans in now to the stadium, although very few of them have made their way down to their seats. LSU still taking batting practice. As we take a look at the championship futures odds, Gabe, down on the bottom of your screen there, Florida already in the championship series. And in a lot of ways, the Gators are in the catbird seat because they have only played 3 games. And I don't think Florida's been particularly impressive. They needed a kind of a miracle rally against Virginia to win Friday night. They barely held off Oral Roberts on Sunday. And then they turned around and got a leaping catch at the wall to beat TCU yesterday. So yeah, have they won their game? Sure. They're going to be tough. The toughest thing about Florida is they're going to have their pitching staff lined up exactly the way they want it. But I actually think the 2 best teams in the country are playing here tonight.
I completely agree. And, obviously it comes down to the whole rest versus momentum thing. We see it every World Series. It's a whole discussion. So while Florida does have the rest, I completely agree with you. Florida has not been that impressive. They were on the easier side of the bracket by far. They won every game by 1 run. They played solid baseball. They didn't make mistakes, but at the same time, these 2 teams are so lethal at the plate that, I just don't know if Florida's got enough to keep up with them.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at those odds, what those tell you, and yes, Florida is the favorite at the moment, but they will not be when this game is over tonight. Either LSU or Wake Forest, Florida's not, those odds of plus 120 aren't going to change more than maybe a dime in either direction. They're going to be between plus 110 and plus 130, which means that the winner between LSU and Wake Forest is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of -120 to -140. It just, those odds are higher right now because they obviously have a very tough game to win tonight first. But I think this is a game that will decide the national title favorite and very, very likely may decide the national champion.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially if you look at who these guys have used. Wake Forest has obviously played one less game. LSU's had to face elimination the last few times, but LSU also, if they go Paul Skenes tonight, they will have Ty Floyd and Thatcher Hurd on rest. So those are two starters that could go early. So yeah, no, I agree. I think the only reason, as you mentioned, Florida is the favorite is because they're in. I do think either of these teams would be favored over Florida, as they should be as well.
Some LSU players signing a few autographs there for some kids who have run down here and taken advantage of the gates opening early. LSU really just biding their time, having some batting practice, and we're waiting word on whether Paul Skenes will start. Let's switch off and
give me 1 second. Let me read. So El Rey saying that Florida has been disrespected all year and that'll drive him. And I definitely think that could be the case. But at the same time, I don't think they were super impressive, even going back to the regional. I don't remember exactly who they played. It was maybe Florida Atlantic or Florida. I know it was Florida A&M, and they just didn't look like they had it from the plate. And aside from that one big inning from them, especially with Wyatt Langford going deep, hitting the longest home run, I believe, ever at Charles Schwab Field against Virginia, they weren't that impressive, and they haven't continued to be. They've done just enough to win the games. Whereas, and that was even in the one game where they were getting favorable weather. You know, the wind was blowing out, so the ball traveled easier. I just think that there's more offensive talent in LSU and Wake Forest, even though we haven't seen the 3-4 guys from Wake Forest really step up to the plate. I just don't know if Florida has enough all around. But at the end of the day, they're the number 2 team, and they're one of the best teams in the SEC. So I think I think say what you will about the side of the bracket that LSU and Wake Forest are on. I think these are the 3 best teams in the country, and I think these are the 3 best teams all season. I think no matter what you say about the teams who were eliminated before this in the regionals and the supers, even in the early days of Omaha, I think these are the 3 best teams that we've got left.
Yeah, I mean, it's a loaded field. There are no Cinderellas left here. And El Rey, I did not mean disrespect toward Florida. Look, drive doesn't win championships as much as talent does. I know people like to talk about it, making a narrative. Florida's got plenty of talent too, by the way. And so they're going to be a tough out, especially with their pitching setup. But I do think it's notable that they would be the underdog against either of these teams, even with that advantage, with the fact that neither LSU nor Wake Forest likely will have its ace ready to go in game 1 or game 2. I think you could see them turn around, pitch maybe in game 3 on 3 days rest if the championship series goes all the way to Monday. So we could see that. We are waiting word on a starting pitcher for LSU as they take batting practice behind us. In the meantime, Gabe, let's spend a few minutes on the NBA draft. It starts at 7 o'clock tonight. Don't think a lot of LSU fans will probably be watching the draft. And we got a comment there. What's your favorite play for tonight? We already talked about that. We're going to make our picks at the end. But Paul Skenes under 11.5 strikeouts, I think, is what we're going with. I just don't see him going deep enough in the game. And you got to pay a little juice. It's like -130. But for him to go, I mean, is he going to strike out 12 guys in 6 innings? That's what it would take to go over that. It's possible. I just don't think I would bet on it.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't bet on it either. I mean, obviously, but transitioning into the safest pick of the night, obviously we know the worst-kept secret in all sports is the fact that the San Antonio Spurs are taking Victor Wembanyama tonight. But really, the number 2 pick is what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, and last year, for those who remember or followed the odds board told you the night before the draft that Paolo Banchero was going to be the number 1 pick of the Orlando Magic. Everyone thought that it was going to be Chet Holmgren, or there was somebody else involved too, and now I can't think of who it was, who was involved in the number 1 pick last year. Yes, but Paolo Banchero overnight went from like a +600 shot to be the number 1 pick to a -600, lock. And we saw that happen today with the number 2 pick, where Brandon Miller was expected to be the number 2 pick as of yesterday. And then all of a sudden today, it became Scoot Henderson of the G League Ignite team. is that became like minus 750 favorite. But the interesting thing is we're now seeing that go back the other way, where it's, what is he now, minus 215, Scoot Henderson to be the number 2 pick, and Brandon Miller still only plus 140. So it's super interesting. I'm not even sure that the betting market knows for sure what will happen at number 2.
Yeah, it's really intriguing. You know, I've been sold on Scoot going number 2 ever since I heard just some comments. I don't remember who the report was, but that the Charlotte Hornets really like Scoot here, and that they weren't even willing to listen to trade talks. I know Pelicans fans. That's all they've been reading lately is all the trade talks. I think it is Scoot personally, but it is a really interesting odds making.
If Scoot Henderson goes number 2, speaking of the Pelicans, does that kill the chance that the Pels would trade Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram to move up tonight? Because a lot of that was to get Scoot Henderson. If he's gone at number 2 to Charlotte, they're not going to trade one of those guys to Portland at number 3, because I think the Pelicans are much less interested in Brandon Miller.
Yeah, I think all of the let's be honest with ourselves. I think at this point of the night, those talks are dead in the water anyway. I don't think they were really going to do it anyways. I think it was more just putting feelers out there.
Now, as far as the Pelicans at number 14, if that is where they stay, here's a list of players and their pick number over under on Caesars who are right around that range of 14. And just because the Pelicans don't trade up to number 2 and make a big blockbuster does not mean they might not trade up to 8 or 9 or trade back down. I mean, there's endless possibilities. But if they do stay at number 14, here are the 4 names who are closest to that pick number as far as their over-under number at Caesars Sportsbook. We've got Cason Wallace of Kentucky, Kobe Buffkin of Michigan, Jordan Hawkins of UConn, and you may remember watching him in the Final Four. That's Angel Reese's cousin. That was the guy they're talking about when Angel said the cookout's going to be lit because they both won national championships. So that's where you've heard that name before. And then Keontae George of Baylor, also at 13.5. Do you have a pick here you like for the Pelicans, Gabe?
I think, not only because of the Angel Reese connection, I like Jordan Hawkins. I think he's the most versatile playmaker that they could get there, and I think he'd be a nice young addition to the team.
Yeah, I like that too. Cason Wallace, I feel like I high upside, but maybe not the floor the Pelicans need right now. I mean, they need a guy who can go in and steady the ship, especially at guard. And a lot of these players strike me as maybe that lower floor, higher ceiling type. And that's why I think Jordan Hawkins is the safest pick. I do like that. Kobe Buffkin, if he's there, it's going to be hard to turn that pick down. But you also may see if Kobe Buffkin is there, the Pelicans making a deal, getting an extra pick, and trading down in draft. So as far as Rookie of the Year odds, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say on this, Gabe, because Chet Holmgren did not play all year last year because of injury for your Oklahoma City Thunder, or as I like to call them, the should still be Seattle Supersonics. But Chet Holmgren involved in these odds for Rookie of the Year, and actually pretty high. When you see Victor Wembanyama as a big favorite, not as big of a favorite as he is to be the number 1 pick, obviously. I also think what's funny here is that the odds market sees Scoot Henderson as having a much bigger year 1 impact than Brandon Miller, just based on these Rookie of the Year odds.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to experience there between Brandon Miller and Scoot. But I do think that Chet Holmgren is worth a flyer there, plus 375. It's really intriguing. We saw the Thunder last year break through from this lottery team to a potential bubble playoff team. They were 1 game away from making the playoffs. We saw Shai Gilgeous-Alexander deep in the most improved player talks and even in MVP discussions. So I think if Chet Holmgren can come in and he can take the Thunder to the playoffs, because, the NBA is really weird in the fact that your team has to do well for you to perform well with individual wins. So, I don't know if Victor Wembanyama in a loaded Western Conference, I don't know if he will solely be enough to take the Spurs to the playoffs. And obviously, we're talking before free agency, so the Spurs could add pieces. Obviously, people are going to want to play with Wembanyama, but not just from a personal standpoint, but from a betting perspective, I really like Chet Holmgren's odds there.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. He's also gotten a year to practice. Not practice because he was injured, but to be around an NBA team, understand the way things are going to go in an NBA season, understand the travel some of the expectations. There's something to be said for that. Now, Victor Wembanyama, a rightful favorite, but I think Chet Holmgren might put up some pretty good numbers in year one. So we're here live in Omaha. That's the NBA draft. Starts at 7 o'clock tonight. Of course, an hour before that at 6 o'clock, we've got LSU and Wake Forest in a decisive College World Series game that will decide bracket 2 here at the College World Series. And I'm going to go over to the Wake Forest side just for a minute and look at those guys start taking swings as LSU wraps up its batting practice. Still no sign of Paul Skenes out here on the field since he just did a little stretching routine early on. I think he's going to start. We still don't have official word. But, Gabe, let's sit down and go through some predictions for this game. LSU, a minus 170 favorite, a minus 1.5 on the run line. The over-under only 8, and in some places you can even get 7.5. So I think we see a tight, low-scoring game. I think that the odds are going to tell the tale of how this game will go. Ultimately, I do think LSU will win. But I got to say, it's important for them to get off to a good start. If you let Wake get out to a lead, not only does Wake Forest have a great pitching staff, but you're going to give them some of that confidence back. Wake Forest did not look great last night at the plate. They looked unsure of themselves. They were chasing pitches. Their top guys they did walk like 4 times, but they struck out 5 times because they were just pressing at the plate, getting way deep into counts. And if they could get out to a lead, you might see that switch flip for the Demon Deacons where they're going to be more aggressive. And they know that they've got a margin for error and they've got those bullpen guys. That's the path for Wake Forest to win this game. So I like LSU to win, but I think they need to, put, even if it's just a run, put up a run on the board early, put the pressure on Wake Forest, keep that pressure on, and then I think that helps you down the road.
Yeah, you saw Tennessee fans a few days ago saying we were down 2-0 for most of the game to Paul Skenes, and it felt like an insurmountable lead. So when you've got Paul Skenes on the mound, who has a 2 and some change ERA at this point, you're going to need just a few runs to make the other team feel completely defeated. And, Wake Forest, as you mentioned, their key in this game needs to be sitting and getting a high pitch count on Paul Skenes early. But at the same time, Paul Skenes attacks the strike zone. And I don't know if they can do that. If we're being honest, I haven't been impressed by Wake Forest offensively in this tournament, whether that be it's easier to hit home runs, obviously, in their home ballpark. It's a hitter-friendly ballpark where they play. We've seen these supposed best hitters in the country, the 2, 3, 4, 5 guys. It felt like every time last night they were threatening. They had guys on base. These guys were up to the plate, and they just didn't step up. So for Wake Forest, you need to get those guys going. And for LSU, just continue to do the things that you've done well. The one thing you cannot do, and this was a big talking point between us last night, you can't give Wake Forest free base runners. At this stage, you can't give free base runners, especially the 4 early. And luckily for LSU, I think Paul Skenes is going to be the guy on the mound. He doesn't do that often. And I see Red Dawn just commenting that either way, LSU or Wake Forest, either one will beat Florida. Yeah, Zach and I had that discussion earlier, and we tend to agree they will be the favorites. So obviously Vegas agrees. But yeah,
I wouldn't discount Florida, but I do think they will be favored. Put it that way, even without Skenes or Rhett Lowder. And on the flip side to what you're saying, or to go along with what you're saying, like those free base runners, that's going to make a pitcher work harder. He's going to throw more pitches. Now he's got to worry about a base runner. He's really got to bear down on the hitter. And with guys who are on shorter rests than they have been all year long, and at least in Paul Skenes' case, threw a lot of pitches on Saturday, that's the kind of thing that can turn this game if it's going to be a tight, 3-2, 4-3 type game. Ultimately, Gabe, I'm going to go LSU 4-3 tonight. That's going to be my prediction. I do think we're going to see a tight, low-scoring game, and I think just 1 or 2 plays could decide it, kind of like Monday night's game when Wake Forest won. This time, those breaks will go LSU's way, and the Tigers will be in the championship series. What say you?
I don't know if I'm going to make a score prediction because, let's be honest, we both know we've been burned too many times by betting the over-under in this tournament already. I think
no more overs.
Yeah. I think LSU will win eventually. I think Paul Skenes on the mound. LSU said all week, don't let us win. Don't let us win and get Paul Skenes back. And that's what teams have done. Tennessee let them win. And I think LSU offensively, even when, say Tommy White or Dylan Cruz, they haven't been at their best this tournament. It's been the guys like the Cade Belosos or the Trey Morgans that have come up huge. And I think we could see something big from the bottom of that order, be it Josh Pearson or just someone down there. I think we'll see a big hit from them, and that's really been what's missing from Wake Forest. So I'll go LSU. I'll say maybe 6-3 or 6-4 in the end.
Okay. All right, so we both like LSU in a tight game. We're live here from Omaha. Wake Forest has now taken over the batting practice cage. And by the way, the wind has shifted again. It is blowing straight in yet again. So that's what it's been most of the week. The Missouri River, of course, over there, it does tend to blow in at this ballpark, and that looks like that's what we're going to have again tonight. Still no sign of Paul Skenes out on the field. But, I mean, look, again, if you're going to start him, you're not going to have him out here in 90-degree heat getting worn out. He's going to be sitting in the clubhouse until it's time for him to really warm up. So I think that's where we're at. We do think he will start, and we hope y'all enjoy the game. Check out our YouTube channel, by the way. Subscribe to the Bayou Bets YouTube channel. I put a short video up there, about 3 minutes long. I went up to the old Johnny Rosenblatt Stadium today, which is up by the Omaha Zoo, and it's in the parking lot of the zoo now. But they've kept some stuff up. They've kept some seats and bleachers, and also the right and left field foul poles up right in the middle of the parking lot. It's kind of cool. So I went and found the spot where Warren Moore's home run ball would have landed. And it's just like a median in the parking lot right now. So kind of cool. Check that out on the Bayou Bets YouTube channel. Subscribe for us. And also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And we'll have live updates tonight and hopefully all weekend here from the College World Series.
Yep, and I've got a live update for you, Zach, coming from Zoe. Rhett Lowder is on the mound tonight for Wake Forest. So we've got confirmation on one side.
Okay, so Rhett Lowder going to pitch. And look, it would be a stunner to me if Paul Skenes was not starting at this point. He did have the little stretching device with the handles on it, the foam stretching device they sent him back to the hotel with last night. I did see that. Jay Johnson said, look, it's going to depend on how he feels in the morning, meaning Thursday morning. But if you're Paul Skenes, unless you just feel terrible, like, are you going to turn down the start? Of course not. So I think it'd be a shock if it was anybody besides Paul Skenes. Just haven't received confirmation yet. And the betting market reflects that. Look, that LSU not going to be favored in this game if it's Rhett Lowder against anybody else.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, there were a few people talking about the questionable decisions, obviously bunting with Trey Morgan last night, trying to do the steal at home for Jay Johnson last night. I don't think Jay Johnson is going to overthink this decision. This is why he gets paid the big bucks. And I think you can't go with anybody but your ace tonight. So even though we don't have the official line to up, actually, we do. So we just said it is Paul Skenes tonight.
It is Paul Skenes. Okay. So I'm curious to see what the betting line, if it has shifted at all since we started this show, now that we have confirmation of guys that we expected to start anyway.
It hasn't shifted at all at Caesars. We are still seeing LSU minus 170 favorites and Wake Forest plus 140. So I think, it just confirms what we've all suspected.
Yeah, very interesting. But I think that that was what everyone foretold. And look, the Wake Forest coach last night said, we're going to see if Lowder's available. We hope he is. And he also said, I expect to see Skenes. He was mentioning how intense Paul Skenes' bullpen session was before yesterday's game, thinking like that's a guy who's getting ready to throw the next day. That's not a guy who's just staying loose. So presumptive, number 1 or 2 pick in the draft in Paul Skenes versus a guy in Rhett Lowder who's going to go anywhere in the 8 to 12 range in the draft. So you got 2 first-round, top half of the first-round draft picks going at it in Omaha. Elimination game. Loser has to go home and get their flag lowered out there outside Charles Schwab Field. And the winner goes on to face Florida in the championship series. So what more could you ask for? It's going to be a great night. We hope y'all enjoy it. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter and TikTok. And that's about it for us live here from Omaha. For Gabe Henderson and our producer, Zoe Collins-Rath, I'm Zach Ewing. Thanks for watching, everybody.